Josh, productive unproductivity. What's up with that?
Let's go through my day. Today I worked probably 3 to 4 hours. It was a very light day. But then what else? I was at the gym 2 to 3 hours. Then I was in the cold tub for a few minutes. I did a hot yoga session in the sauna. I read for 30 minutes to an hour. Me and Justin were on ChatGPT messing around with some actually very insightful knowledge bombs for maybe 30 minutes. We made a video which took maybe an hour long. What else? I probably listened to 3 to 4 hours worth of podcasts in 2x speed, so that is around 2 hours. And today I felt wildly unproductive. On the outside looking in, this looks like a very productive day. I got a lot done, and maybe I did. But how much did that really take up? Maybe that was 8 to 10 hours, and I sleep maybe 8 hours. But there's still like 6 to 7 hours of the day missing. And what did I spend the day doing? I mean, it was just useless jargon. Where does the cost benefit analysis lie when you're trying to determine what is
Josh, have you ever heard the song? I can't remember the name of it, but I think it's A Time to Do Whatever. So it's based upon an old Bible verse, and it was made famous, I think, in the 70s. But like for everything there is, there it is. It's turn, turn, turn by the birds. That's what it is. And the point of the song is that there's a kind of time for everything. And one of the more famous refrains is that, there's a time for peace, there's a time for war. There's a time to kill, and there's a time to, refrain from killing. There's a time to love, and there's a time to hate. And I think through all of this, where it goes to is if you want to do more of the bullshitty corporate jargon, it's the concept of work-life balance, where it is true that if you wanted to be a efficient, productivity machine, like on the level of like a Musk or whatever, right? You could probably work 14 hours a day and minimize your sleep by maximizing the potential of your sleep. And, if you're trying to push out a project or you've got some large goal or you're overseeing multiple companies, you might need to do that. But at the same time, too, when it comes to maybe something that's more appropriate for the average person or that works better for the average person, I think that if the average person holds himself to the standard that every single second that I do, I must be productive. Well, I would say it's yes and no, in the sense that you, of course, need to be productive on the whole. But at the same time, too, you also need to kind of take a little bit of time for yourself. And if that's just simply, staring at the wall and watching paint dry, or let me give you a slightly better example. Before she passed, I took care of my grandmother, Alzheimer's, if you don't already know. And while I viewed it as a privilege, and I was glad to have the responsibility to take care of her, I also had to have a little bit of time for myself. And anyone who's been in a similar situation where they have to care for a family member or a loved one, that's whether it's like a senior citizen or perhaps maybe you have a newborn child, which on either end of the spectrum. My point is that like even though you might be very dedicated to doing this, you might view it as a privilege and an honor to do it and treat it as such. Trying or expecting that you can do that all the time without any you time, that's probably an unrealistic expectation. Sure, it might work for one or two people out of, a million, but it probably won't work for everyone. So I think that's kind of to your point too, that how do you maintain productivity, at least on an upward trend where you can keep being productive, but how do you kind of sprinkle in enough slack time for yourself so you can decompress and recharge and be ready for the next day, week, month, or whatever unit of time you want to focus on?
Yeah, that's really what I was kind of trying to compartmentalize. At what point is it good to take rest, and what rest is good? Because I would argue that if I spent those 6 to 7 hours that I had of lay time thinking, that would be a very productive way of lay time. But if I spent that time, all of it, watching Netflix or laying down and kind of rotting my brain in different ways, that could have more harm than the good that I did. And I don't know at what point does the cost benefit analysis lay, because I probably felt the most productive today. Well, one, in the gym, you always feel fantastic in the gym, but two was when I was expressing my thoughts and trying to formulate them into new ideas. That, for some reason, really gives me the biggest mental boost to where I feel like I am actually learning and obtaining new information.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Your mind is a muscle in of itself, a mental muscle, and if you don't work it out, it becomes flaccid. So 100% agree with that. One other thing too I'll throw out there is, again, I've said this before on stream. I'm a fan of Adams on many things. Some things I disagree with him on, which is to be expected, but a lot of things he gets right. And he has been a big proponent of using psychedelics. And while I have never used psychedelics myself, I certainly understand the concept of using something, things like ayahuasca, or however you say it, where you're basically using a tool to do introspection on yourself. And while you cannot necessarily do this all the time, from time to time at whatever regular interval is appropriate for you, you can probably derive a lot more benefit from it. And yes, even if during that period of time when you are, let's say, under the effects of whatever psychedelic you're on, you of course will be out of commission. But if you're out of commission for, let's say, 48 hours, those 48 hours that you're out of commission, the return on your investment, being able to think clearer, kind of resetting your driver files of your mind or whatever, right, far outweigh the cost that you initially had to put in to invest into the reward that you got.
Yeah, and one thing that I used to do when I would work 14 hours a day every single day, before I had any sort of plan, before I had any income coming in, I was forced to work very hard because I had no clue what I was going to do. My mindset was I have to spend 100% of my time doing something. And that was usually listening to podcasts, reading books, listening to books, basically nonstop consuming information. And the way you learn is not from consuming 100 different things for 15 hours a day. That is probably the worst way to learn. I did grasp a lot of information, but the information I grasped was when I would ponder over those thoughts and write them down, when I would express the thoughts that I took in and then almost made them my own. Because if all you're doing is taking in information, you have no filtration mechanism, and you will never be able to make those thoughts your own. When I really started to learn, Justin, is when I met you, when me and you would talk about these macroeconomic subjects every single night, because I was forced to put all the things that I learned into my own ideas. And that is the most powerful thing that you can do to speed your learning drastically. And that doesn't just have to come from talking to another person or making videos about it. It can also come from writing it down, tweeting about it, even if you're just harassing your mother, telling her how all these things work. It is a way that is forcing you to tell people or to tell yourself what you just learned. And you will never know how little you know about something until you start talking about it.
Yeah, probably one of the first clues that you're actually learning is you realize, oh, I really don't know anything. Or the more that I learn, the more I realize how effing ignorant I am. And that's pretty much me every day. One thing I would also say too, Josh, is going back to the concept of, turn the song. When you're just getting started out on something, you probably want to go whole ham on I've got to figure out as much as I possibly can. It's kind of like throwing the bowl of spaghetti at the wall. And
that actually kind of worked for me pretty good. But when I was retaining the information, it was because I was writing it down. Like I remember George Gammon and Jeff Snyder's second interview they ever did. I wrote down every single word that was in that interview. And then I it was just because I knew that what they were saying was something incredibly special that I had to know. And it just sounded like jargon. But then you figure it out and you get
a so I think again a time for everything. And when you're just getting started, especially if you're a young man, and you're just trying to get yourself and I suppose a young lady too, and you're trying to get yourself where it's at, don't feel bad about kind of again going whole ham to just kind of starting to try things to see what works. But the goal is to as quickly as you can identify what works for you, and that might not be what works for someone else. Once you figure out what you're good at and kind of what you like to do, and you're able to kind of blend this together into something useful, that's going to be a really, really good step, because then you can start working on your form. You can figure, okay, well, this is what I want to do. How can I do it more efficiently? How can I rely on other people? And that's kind of when you start, building up your talent stack of being able to kind of do more. You're able to put out more units, so you're able to be more productive with less inputs, because the inputs you have are better.
Yeah, we know a lot of young men today that don't exactly know what they want to do, but they're trying new things. You know a few buddies down that go to your gym who are starting some businesses. I know some of the same. I've done the same thing as them. I've started my own business and kind of done those same things. And I'm hitting that crossroad again because I am confused as to what I want to do with the current business I'm running, which is kind of a side hustle, but it brings in most of the income. Do I want to continue doing this, or do I want to go on to something bigger? And I mean, I can do both at the same time, but do I expand this? Or it's kind of an autopilot right now, or do I go on and try and do something new? And right now, I don't know. I can do both, but when you try and do too many things at once, you fail at everything. And I've learned that the hard way too many times.
Yeah, the phrase on that front is, as much as good as when you're just getting off to try new things, you also want to be careful about having too many irons in the fire. That's
Yeah.
the other.
I've learned that the hard way too many times, and I am in these crossroads, and it just gets my blood boiling. I mean, it was why I was so upset, and I said, Justin, we have to do this video right now at 10:30 at night, because it was just bothering me immensely, because this is a problem that I can't figure out. And when I have one of these problems, I have to change my environment. And I don't know if this works for other people, but from personal experience, anytime I took a trip somewhere, every single time I've taken a trip somewhere, that spot that was missing, that's driving me crazy, that light bulb always clicks in. Every single time I've gone to just random ass places with Justin or Gammon, or just random people going and doing incredibly random things that have very little to do with what I'm currently doing, that light bulb clicks in, because you give yourself that mental clarity, and then you laugh at it. Or like, how didn't I know that this is what I was supposed to do? So
it changes the perspective.
Yeah,
and
you did it very easily. So I will be moving to Colombia next month, not just for this. I will also be in a new environment with a bunch of two hyper competitive men who we can just work alongside each other. And I like to build off of other people's motivation and work ethic, but that is not the motive operandi of this video.
Modus operandi. You could just say MO.
Yeah.
Yes.
So thank you guys, and we'll see you.